Hello, my name is Devin Hayes, 23 years old. I'm a first-year student at the University of Colorado Law School living in Boulder, a small city nestled at the foot of the majestic Rocky Mountains. Boulder has a beauty that is both poetic and rugged, with tree-lined streets shaded by green pines, snow-capped mountains in winter, and air so fresh it feels like you're breathing in the entire world. But for me, this place is more than just its natural scenery. It's where I'm trying to find myself, trying to prove that I'm not the invisible person my family has always treated me as. I grew up in Castle Rock, a town a few hours' drive south of Boulder. Castle Rock is smaller, quieter, with red brick houses scattered along gently sloping streets, ancient oak trees, and an atmosphere where you can smell hay and freshly baked bread from the local bakery every morning. But for me, Castle Rock was never a warm place. It was where I always felt forgotten, like a long, silent shadow passing through my own home. My family, how should I put it, is a picture that looks beautiful from the outside but is full of cracks within. My father, Richard Hayes, is a small-scale real estate investor. He's tall and lean with a sharp face and eyes that always seem to be calculating the value of everything. He's not the type for hugs or heart-to-heart talks. To him, everything can be reduced to money, even emotions. Old people should know their place and not be a burden to their children, he once said at dinner, his voice as flat as if he were reading a financial report. I just bowed my head, swallowing the anger inside, because I knew he was referring to my grandmother, someone I love more than anyone. My mother, Cynthia Hayes, is the opposite, but not in a better way. She's an administrative manager at a cosmetic surgery center in downtown Denver. She always appears with perfectly curled blonde hair, glossy red manicured nails, and a smile I'm certain she's practiced in front of the mirror hundreds of times. Mom is a perfectionist, wanting everything to be beautiful and flawless, from the way the dinner table is set to how her children must perform in the eyes of the neighbors. But that perfectionism comes with comparison. And in those comparisons, I'm always the loser. Look at Kyle and learn from him. He knows how to make things happen, she often says, her voice brimming with pride when talking about my older brother. Kyle, my eldest brother, is 29 and the pride of the family. He earned an MBA from Arizona State University and now runs a tech startup in Austin, Texas. In my parents' eyes, Kyle is the embodiment of success. A luxurious apartment, international business trips, and online articles praising him as a promising young entrepreneur. But I know that behind the glitz, Kyle is struggling. His company is facing financial difficulties, though he's never admitted it. I heard from a mutual friend that he's taken on a large loan to keep the business afloat. But to my parents, Kyle remains the golden standard, the reason they constantly compare me to him. Devin, why can't you be a bit more like your brother? Mom once asked, her eyes full of disappointment. I just gave a faint smile, not responding, because I know no matter what I say, she wouldn't listen. Then there's my younger sister, Avery, 19, a freshman at a small college in Denver. Avery is the kind of person who always knows how to make people like her. She's lively, outgoing, always smiling, and has a ton of friends on social media. The happy family photos she posts on Instagram often get hundreds of likes. But if you look closely, you'll notice something. I'm rarely in those photos. Once I jokingly asked Avery, "Why don't you ever tag me in the family pictures?" She just laughed, a carefree but cutting laugh. "Oh, Devin, you're busy with law school. Who would dare bother you?" I knew that wasn't the real reason. Avery, like my parents, doesn't really care about me. To her, I'm just a faint part of the perfect family picture she wants to create. In that family, the only person who truly saw me, who truly listened to me, was my grandmother, Lorraine Hayes. She lives alone in an old house on the outskirts of Fort Collins, about an hour-and-a-half drive from my school. Her house is a special place, like a world separate from the noise of life. It's small, weathered with chipped wooden window frames and a little garden full of wildflowers that she still tends to, even at nearly 80 years old. Grandma is a petite woman with snow-white hair and warm brown eyes that always shine with kindness. After my grandfather passed away 4 years ago, she's lived alone but never complains. She always told me, "Devin, as long as you live true to your heart, that's enough." Those words mean more to me than any praise from my parents. I still remember summer afternoons in Castle Rock when I was a kid. While my parents were busy with work and Kyle was off bragging about his school awards, I'd run to Grandma's house. She'd sit in her armchair telling me stories about my grandfather, a dedicated lawyer who inspired me to pursue law. "Your grandfather always said that law isn't just about winning cases. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves," she'd say in her warm, steady voice. I'd sit there listening, feeling seen and understood, a feeling I never found at home. But things started to change after Grandpa passed away. Grandma hasn't been as sharp as she used to be. Some days she calls me Henry, my grandfather's name. Other times she forgets what day it is. I've noticed her memory is declining, but she's still physically fine. She can still cook for herself and tend to her garden, though sometimes she forgets why she's doing it. I'm worried, but every time I bring it up with my parents, they brush it off. "She's old. Being forgetful is normal," Dad says coldly. Mom adds, "Why are you worrying about her? She has her own house, her pension, she can take care of herself." I don't understand. How can they talk about Grandma, the person who raised them, who loved them, like she's some old, useless object? The feeling of being forgotten doesn't just come from my parents or siblings. It's like a contagion in my family. One Christmas, I came home with small gifts for everyone. A law book for Kyle, a knitted scarf for Mom, and a landscape painting I made for Dad. But throughout dinner, no one mentioned my gifts. Mom only talked about Kyle's Europe trip, and Dad asked Avery about her summer plans. I sat there eating cold cuts, feeling like an uninvited guest. When I got up to clear the table, Avery didn't even look up from her phone. "Thanks, Devin," she said, but her tone made it clear it was just to get it over with. I'm not the type to hold grudges. I've learned to accept that I'm not the center of this family. But deep down, I've always hoped that one day they'd see me, truly see me, the way Grandma does. She's the only one who never forgets my birthday, who always asks about my dreams and fears. Every time I visit, she makes tea, sits down, and listens to me talk about law school, tough exams, or just an afternoon by the lake in Boulder watching the sunset. She never judges, never compares. To her, I'm not invisible. I'm Devin, her grandson, the one she loves. But I can't deny there's a growing distance between me and Grandma. Not because I don't want to be close to her, but because of time and geography. Fort Collins isn't far from Boulder, but for a first-year student like me, driving over an hour and a half every weekend isn't always easy. I'm busy with coursework, study groups, and late nights studying for exams. Every time I call her, I tell myself, this weekend I'll visit her. But then the weekend comes and I get caught up in deadlines, plans with friends, or just exhaustion that makes me want to sleep in. I reassure myself that she's fine, that she can still take care of herself. But deep down, I know I'm making excuses. Everything changed one Friday afternoon when I got a text from her. It was short. "Devin, are you free this weekend? I made a birthday cake and want you to try it." I stared at the message, my heart tightening. Her birthday. Her 79th. I'd almost forgotten. I checked my schedule and realized I had no major exams or deadlines that weekend. I texted back, "I'll be there, Grandma. Wait for me." I didn't know that visit would change everything. It wasn't just an ordinary birthday. It was the start of a storm, a truth I never could have anticipated. Then a journey where I would have to confront my own family, the very people I once believed were where I belonged. The drive from Boulder to Fort Collins that day felt longer than I expected. It wasn't the distance, about an hour and a half if the roads were clear, but the thoughts that kept surging in my mind. Interstate 25 stretched out before me, flanked by golden sun-scorched fields of dry grass and patches of deep green pine forests. I turned on the radio, but no song could drown out the growing unease in my heart. I wondered, how is Grandma doing? Is she really okay, as I've been telling myself? And why, deep down, did I feel this trip wasn't just an ordinary birthday visit? I brought a small gift for her, a wooden photo frame I made during my spare time at my apartment. Inside was a picture I took of her last summer, standing in her garden, holding a watering can, smiling brightly under the sunlight. It was one of the rare moments I saw her truly happy after Grandpa passed away. I hoped the frame would bring her joy, reminding her that I'm always here, no matter how busy life gets. As I turned onto the road leading to her house on the outskirts of Fort Collins, my heart tightened. The house came into view, small and weathered, with a faded gray tiled roof and chipped wooden window frames. The front garden was still vibrant with wildflowers, golden daisies, lavender, and a few wild roses she loved. But something felt off. The house seemed quieter than usual. No smoke rose from the chimney, no warm light glowed from the living room. I told myself she might be resting or busy in the kitchen with the birthday cake she mentioned. I parked the car, grabbed my bag, and stepped onto the porch. The wooden door creaked as I pushed it open. "Grandma, I'm here," I called, my voice deliberately loud and cheerful, hoping to surprise her. But there was no response. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of old wood and herbal tea filling the air. The living room was as it always was, a floral upholstered armchair, a small wooden table with a vase of dried flowers, and the wedding photo of Grandma and Grandpa hanging on the wall. But the silence was eerie. No sound of footsteps, no soft humming of a tune, the things I usually heard when I visited. "Grandma?" I called again, my voice lower now, tinged with worry. I walked through the short hallway to the kitchen, and there she was. Grandma sat alone at the dining table in front of a small, beautiful birthday cake covered in white frosting and decorated with a few strawberries. She wore the light blue sweater I gave her last year, her silver hair neatly tied back. But what made my heart stop was her expression. Empty, lost, as if she were staring into some distant place, not this kitchen. "Grandma, it's me," I said, stepping closer, forcing a smile. She looked up, her warm brown eyes brightening slightly as she recognized me. "Devin," she whispered, her voice hoarse but full of affection. "You're here. I made this cake, but..." She paused, looking down at the cake, then back at me, her eyes flickering with confusion. Why did I make it? Is it someone's birthday? It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. It was her birthday, her 79th, and she had forgotten. I tried to stay calm, sitting down beside her and placing my hand on hers. Her hand was cold, fragile, her thin fingers trembling slightly. "It's your birthday, Grandma," I said as gently as I could. "I came to eat cake with you." She smiled, but it was a weak smile, as if she were trying to process what I'd said. "Oh, my birthday?" she repeated, looking at the cake. "So I must have made this for myself, but why are you the only one here? Where are your parents? Your siblings?" Her question cut like a knife. I glanced around the small kitchen, hoping for some sign of anyone, Dad, Mom, Kyle, or Avery. But there was nothing. No one. The table was set for just two, with 2 small plates and 2 old forks. No signs of a birthday celebration. No flowers, no gifts, not even a card. Just her homemade cake, and me. "They must be busy, Grandma," I lied, trying to hide the anger rising inside me. "But I'm here now. Let's eat the cake, okay?" I stood up, grabbed a knife, and cut a slice for her, placing it on her plate. She nodded, but her eyes remained distant, as if she were trying to recall something. We ate in silence, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock. The cake was delicious, but every bite I swallowed felt bitter. Not because of the cake, but because of the truth dawning on me. After we finished, I cleared the table, trying to act normal. Grandma sat there watching me, then suddenly said, "Devin, have you seen your grandfather? He said he'd be home for my birthday. My heart clenched again. Grandpa had been gone for 4 years. I didn't know how to respond, so I took her hand, smiled, and lied to comfort her. Grandpa's at the market, Grandma. Don't worry. He'll be back soon. She nodded, but I knew she didn't fully understand. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out onto the porch, pulled out my phone, and dialed Dad. It rang a few times before he picked up. "Devin, what's up?" His voice was cold, as if I were interrupting him. "Today's Grandma's birthday," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why isn't anyone here? Where is everybody?" There was a long pause. Then he replied, his tone flat. "Oh, we're all skiing in Aspen. Kyle wanted the whole family to go, so your mom and Avery came along. The weather's nice this weekend, you know." I felt my face flush with anger. "Skiing?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You knew it was Grandma's birthday, didn't you? Why didn't anyone tell me about the trip? Why isn't anyone here with her?" "Devin, calm down," Dad cut in, sounding slightly impatient. "It's just a birthday. They happen every year. Besides, Grandma has you there, right? Your mom sent her some money last week. She's not lacking anything." I hung up, unable to listen to another word. I looked at Grandma, still sitting there, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth, her eyes lost. The anger inside me flared like a wildfire. My family, the people I once thought I belonged to, hadn't just abandoned me, they'd abandoned her. The woman who spent her life loving and caring for them was now treated like something disposable, not worth their time. I sat back down beside her, fighting back tears. "Grandma, can I stay with you for a few days?" I asked. She looked at me and smiled, but it was a lifeless smile, not like the ones she used to give. "You're such a good boy, Devin," she whispered. "You're just like your grandfather." That night I lay on the old bed in the living room, listening to the wind whistling through the gaps in the windows. The house was cold, but not as cold as my heart felt. I thought about my parents, Kyle, Avery, the happy family photos that didn't include me, and how easily they forgot Grandma, the woman who was once the heart of this family. I wondered, what made them this way? And what could I do to protect her, to hold on to the love I once believed in? I didn't know that just a few days later things would get even worse. The storm I sensed today was only the beginning. The truth I was about to uncover would make me see my family in an entirely new light and force me to stand up, not just for Grandma, but for myself. The days following Grandma's birthday, I decided to take a few days off from school to stay in Fort Collins. I told my professor I needed time to handle family matters. A vague excuse, but enough to get approved. Truthfully, I didn't know what I was trying to resolve. All I knew was that after that heartbreaking birthday, I couldn't go back to Boulder, couldn't resume my normal life with the image of Grandma sitting silently by her birthday cake haunting me. I needed to be here, with her, to ensure she wasn't alone, that she still had someone who cared. Grandma's house remained a sanctuary despite its age and the marks of time. Every morning I woke up early, brewed tea for her, and joined her in the small backyard garden. She liked sitting on the old wooden chair, watching me pull weeds or water the lavender bushes. "You're good at gardening, Devin," she said, her voice frail but filled with pride. I just smiled, hiding my sadness. She didn't know I was doing these things not only to help her, but to hold on to the rare moments in this house, a place that preserved memories of Grandpa. A place where I still felt I belonged. In the afternoons, as soft golden sunlight filtered through the windows, Grandma and I sat in the living room revisiting old stories. She talked about Grandpa, about their youth when he was a passionate young lawyer in Fort Collins. "Your grandfather used to say that the law is about protecting justice, but justice isn't always found in books," she recounted, her eyes lighting up as if reliving those days. I listened, memorizing every detail, knowing these stories were my connection to Grandpa, the man who inspired me to study law. But sometimes, mid-story, she'd pause, looking at me with a confused expression. "What's your name again?" she'd ask, her voice trembling. In those moments, I'd take her hand, smile, and say, "I'm Devin, your grandson, the one who will always be here to protect you." She'd nod, but I could see the bewilderment in her eyes. Her memory was slipping away piece by piece like puzzle fragments carried off by the wind. I tried to keep things normal. I cleaned the house, fixed a leaky kitchen faucet, and swept dried leaves off the porch. But every time I looked around, I couldn't shake a sense of unease. Something was wrong, as if the house were hiding a secret I hadn't yet uncovered. I started noticing small details. A few papers scattered on Grandma's desk, a brown envelope tucked in a drawer I'd never seen before. I didn't want to snoop through her things, but curiosity and worry compelled me to look. One morning while Grandma was napping, I opened the envelope. Inside were some bank documents, bills, and a handwritten note. The handwriting wasn't Grandma's. It was sharp and rigid like my father's. The note was brief. "Meet the buyer, Tuesday, 10 a.m. I frowned, trying to make sense of it. Buyer? Buying what? I set the note down, telling myself it was probably related to one of Dad's small real estate deals in Fort Collins. Maybe he'd just used Grandma's desk to jot it down. But a small voice in my head warned, something's not right. On the last day before I planned to return to Boulder, I decided to clean more thoroughly so Grandma could live comfortably while I was gone. I was dusting the bookshelf in the living room when I heard a knock at the door. It was a firm, deliberate knock, not the gentle tap of a neighbor or mail carrier. I opened the door to find a middle-aged couple neatly dressed. The man wore a gray suit and held a leather briefcase, while the woman in a beige sweater offered a polite smile. "Hello," the man said, his voice even. "I'm Bob, and this is Susan Miller. We're here to take possession of the house." I froze, feeling as if I'd been doused with ice water. "Take possession of the house?" I repeated, my voice faltering. "This house isn't for sale. You must be mistaken." The man frowned, glancing at the woman beside him, then pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. "No, we're not mistaken," he said, handing me a document. "We signed a contract to buy this house from Mr. Richard Hayes and Mrs. Lorraine Hayes. This is the deed of transfer signed by Mrs. Lorraine. We're here for a final inspection before moving in." The world around me seemed to stop. I took the paper, my eyes scanning the dense printed text, but one thing stood out. Grandma's shaky signature at the bottom. I recognized it immediately, uneven, slightly slanted like the one on my birthday cards. But why? Why would she sign a contract to sell her house? This house was everything she had, the place where she and Grandpa had lived their entire lives, where all their memories were kept. "My grandmother didn't sell this house," I said, my voice hardening. "There's got to be a mistake. My grandmother, she's not in a state to sign things like this." I felt my face flush, my hand crumpling the paper. Susan, the woman, looked at me with pity. "We're very sorry if something's unclear," she said. "But we worked directly with Mr. Richard. He said Mrs. Lorraine agreed to sell and she signed in our presence. We've already paid the deposit." My mind went blank. My father did this. I glanced back into the house where Grandma was still napping, completely unaware of what was happening. "Please wait here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, then closed the door. I needed to talk to her. I gently touched her shoulder. "Grandma, can you wake up? I need to ask you something." She opened her eyes, looking at me with a sleepy gaze. "Devin, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice faint. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, keeping my tone as gentle as possible. "Grandma, do you remember signing any papers recently? Papers about this house?" I asked, my heart pounding. She frowned, as if trying to dig through her memory. "Papers?" she repeated, her voice vague. I don't quite remember. A few days ago, Richard came by with someone. They told me to sign something." Her words stabbed through my heart. I stood up, a mix of anger and pain surging within me. My father had taken advantage of her. He'd exploited her confusion to make her sign a contract she didn't understand. This house, where she'd lived her whole life, where she and Grandpa built every memory, had been sold behind her back, behind mine. I returned to the door where the couple was still waiting. Bob the man stood tall, still holding his briefcase, his eyes cold and assessing. Susan offered an awkward smile, but it didn't hide her impatience. I tried to stay calm, though my hand gripped the deed so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "There's been a huge mistake. My grandmother isn't capable of signing this contract. I'll handle this. Please leave." Bob frowned, exchanging a quick glance with Susan before speaking. "Devin, is it?" he said, his tone calm but firm. "We understand you're surprised, but the contract is signed. Everything is legal, notarized. 1 week from now, we'll be moving in. We hope your family can arrange to clear out and leave by then." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. "1 week?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "You don't understand. This is my grandmother's house. She'd never want to sell it." My face burned, my breathing quickened. Susan stepped forward, her voice softer but still resolute. "We're very sorry, Devin," she said. "But we worked directly with Mr. Richard Hayes. He said Mrs. Lorraine agreed and she signed in our presence. If there's an issue, you should talk to your father." I wanted to scream, to throw the deed in their faces, to tell them they were destroying my grandmother's life. But Bob's cold, unyielding gaze silenced me. I knew arguing with them now wouldn't solve anything. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, my voice dry. "I'll take care of this." I slammed the door shut, not waiting for their response, and leaned against the old wooden door, feeling the world collapse beneath me. I looked around the house, the armchair where Grandma loved to tell stories, the wedding photo of her and Grandpa on the wall, the small garden outside the window with lavender bushes swaying gently in the breeze. All of this, all these memories had been sold by my father like some commodity, and now I had 1 week to stop it. Grandma, the woman I loved most, had been betrayed by her own son, and I, who always thought I could protect her, had been completely unaware. I grabbed my phone and dialed Dad's number. Each ring felt like a knife stabbing deeper into my chest. Finally, he picked up. "Devin, what's it now?" His voice was cold, as if I were an employee bothering him during his lunch break. "Dad, I want the truth," I said, my voice firm despite my pounding heart. "You forced Grandma to sign a contract to sell her house, didn't you? She didn't know what she was signing. You took advantage of her confusion to sell this house. Why? For what?" There was a long silence, so long I thought he'd hang up. Then he responded, his voice still calm but with a hint of strain. "Devin, you're blowing this out of proportion. She agreed. She signed. Everything's legal. You weren't here. You don't know." "Legal?" I cut him off, my voice rising, unable to hold back. "You call it legal to coerce someone who's not mentally sound into signing papers? You knew she's been struggling with her memory. You knew she couldn't understand what she was signing, and now they're saying they'll move in a week. Where's Grandma supposed to go, a nursing home or out on the street?" "Don't talk to me like that," Dad snapped, the first time I'd heard him lose his composure. "You think I did this for fun? Do you know how much debt Kyle is in? His company is on the verge of bankruptcy. If we don't help him, the whole family will lose everything. Grandma's house, it's just an old house. She doesn't need it anymore. We'll find somewhere else for her." I was stunned, as if I'd been slapped hard across the face. Kyle. It was all for Kyle. Dad had sold Grandma's house, the place where she and Grandpa had lived their entire lives, where all their memories were held, to save Kyle's company. Anger surged within me, but beneath it was pain. The pain of betrayal. "So you chose Kyle over Grandma," I said, my voice trembling. "You're willing to sacrifice her to save him, aren't you?" Dad went silent. I heard him sigh over the phone, but there was no explanation, no apology. "Devin, you don't understand," he finally said, his voice cold again. "This is for the good of the whole family. You need to grow up and accept it." I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The good of the whole family? Those words cut like a knife. Weren't Grandma and I part of that whole family? I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. I thought of Mom, of Avery, wondering if they knew about this. Did Mom agree with Dad? Did Avery, with her happy family Instagram posts, know that Grandma was being pushed out of her own home? I called Mom. The phone rang, but she didn't pick up. I tried again, this time sending a text. Mom, I need to talk. It's about Grandma. Urgent. 30 minutes passed, and there was still no reply, no call back. My heart felt like it was being crushed. I thought of Kyle, of Avery. I dialed Avery's number, but she didn't answer. I texted, Avery, do you know about Grandma's house being sold? What do you think about this? No response. I wasn't surprised. Avery always avoided confrontation, always sided with our parents. I sat there in Grandma's living room, feeling more alone than ever. My family, the people I once thought I belonged to, had betrayed not only Grandma but me as well. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with my love for Grandma on one side and the harsh truth about my family on the other. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't let this end like this. The next morning, I decided to act. I called my civil law professor, Margaret Stein, a strict but fair woman who once told our class, "The law is meant to protect the vulnerable if you know how to use it." I briefly explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Professor, I need advice. My grandmother was coerced into signing a contract to sell her house when she wasn't mentally competent. What can I do to stop this?" Professor Stein was quiet for a moment, then replied, "Devin, if your grandmother wasn't mentally competent at the time of signing, the contract could be declared void. But you'll need evidence. Medical records, witnesses, anything that proves she wasn't aware of her actions. Can you gather those?" "I'll try. Thank you, Professor," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. After the call, I went to the local clinic in Fort Collins and met with Dr. Harris, who had been treating Grandma since last year. I explained the situation briefly. Dr. Harris nodded and said, "I'll provide copies of her medical records. 6 months ago, we noted that Mrs. Lorraine was showing signs of cognitive decline. She often confuses time and forgets recent events." I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling like I'd found a ray of light in the darkness. But I knew the journey was far from over. I needed more evidence. I thought of Mrs. Helen, Grandma's neighbor, who often visited and chatted with her over the fence. I decided to see her that evening. When I knocked on her door, Mrs. Helen greeted me with a sad smile. She confirmed that Grandma was no longer as sharp as she used to be, often forgetting things. She even recalled the day 2 weeks ago when my father brought 2 strangers to Grandma's house. What Mrs. Helen provided felt like the final piece of the puzzle. I was both relieved and furious. Relieved because I had another witness. Furious because the truth was becoming painfully clear. My father had deliberately taken advantage of Grandma, fully aware she couldn't understand what she was doing. That night, I sat in the living room drafting a plan. I would gather all the evidence, medical records, Mrs. Helen's testimony, and if necessary, I'd ask for help from the couple buying the house. But 1 week wasn't enough time to prepare. I decided I'd bring Grandma to stay temporarily at my student apartment in Boulder while I worked to stop the transfer. I knew I was confronting my own family, my parents, who always saw me as invisible. But this time I wouldn't let them ignore me. I would stand up for Grandma and for myself. The next morning, I helped Grandma pack her things to go to Boulder. I didn't want her to stay here, not when that couple could return any moment with keys, claiming the house as theirs. "Grandma, I want to take you to my place for a few days," I said, keeping my voice gentle as if it were just a casual trip. "Boulder's beautiful. You'll like it." Grandma looked at me, her eyes hazy but still holding a glimmer of trust. "You want me to go with you, Devin?" she asked, her voice frail. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Grandma," I replied, taking her hand, swallowing the ache in my chest. "I want you close to me, just for a few days." She nodded, giving a weak smile, and I began packing a few clothes, the notebook she often wrote in, and the wedding photo of her and Grandpa. When I placed the photo in the bag, she suddenly grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't lose it, Devin. It's a memory of me and your grandfather." I nodded, my throat tightening. I wouldn't let anything of hers be lost, not just the photo, but the house, the memories, everything. The drive to Boulder was long and quiet. Grandma sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, occasionally murmuring about the dry fields or the distant Rocky Mountains. I kept the radio on low, but my mind wasn't here. I thought of my parents, Kyle, Avery. How could they do this to her? How could they treat Grandma, the woman who raised them, loved them, like a burden to be discarded? My student apartment in Boulder was tiny, barely enough room for a bed, a desk, and a small kitchen corner. I gave Grandma the bed and spread a blanket on the floor for myself. She looked around, smiling. "This place is cozy, Devin. Are you doing okay here?" I nodded, though I knew I was lying. This place wasn't meant for her. No garden, no armchair, no space for her to hold on to her fading memories. But at least here, she was safe. At least here, I could protect her. With the medical records and Mrs. Helen's testimony, I felt closer to saving the house. But I still needed to know more. Why had my parents done this? Where did the money from the house sale go? I decided to call Kyle. I needed to hear his explanation. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. "Devin, long time no talk." His voice came through, trying to sound cheerful, but I caught the tension in it. "What's up?" "You know about Dad selling Grandma's house, don't you?" I went straight to the point. "You know he coerced her into signing a contract when she wasn't lucid. Did the money from the house go to your company's account? Explain, Kyle." There was a long pause. Then Kyle sighed, his voice dropping. "Devin, you don't understand. My company's in serious trouble. I owe a huge amount of money. If I don't pay it off, everything I've built will collapse. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me." "Help you?" I nearly shouted. "By selling Grandma's house, by taking advantage of her? Do you know where she is right now? She's in my apartment because Mom and Dad were about to push her out of her home. Have you ever thought about her, Kyle? Or do you only think about yourself?" "Don't talk to me like that," Kyle snapped, his voice thick with anger. "You think I wanted this? You think I like relying on Mom and Dad? You have no idea what I'm dealing with, Devin. You're just a kid studying law, sitting there judging everyone." I hung up, my heart pounding. Kyle's words cut like a knife, but they confirmed what I'd suspected. My family had chosen Kyle, his interests, and discarded Grandma like something worthless. I sat in the apartment, watching Grandma sleep on the small bed, her breathing soft but faint. I felt utterly betrayed. No one in the family, except me, truly cared for or respected her. They'd turned her into a tool, a means to save Kyle, to preserve the perfect family image they always flaunted. I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter. Not an apology, not an explanation, a notice of intent to sue. I listed the charges: elder abuse, avoidable civil transaction due to lack of mental capacity at the time of signing. I emailed the draft to Professor Stein, asking if I had a chance of winning. She replied quickly, "Devin, with the evidence you have, this case has merit, but prepare yourself. This isn't just a legal battle, it's a family war." I knew Professor Stein was right. When I sent the notice of intent to sue to my parents via email with copies to Kyle and Avery, the response was immediate. Dad called, his voice practically a growl over the phone. "Devin, what the hell are you doing? Suing your parents? You're an ungrateful brat, tearing this family apart. Who do you think you are?" Mom called right after, her voice choked but not with remorse. "Devin, how could you do this to us? Do you want the whole world to know our family's a mess? Do you want to destroy Kyle?" I didn't respond, just quietly hung up. Their words no longer held weight with me. They'd chosen their path and I'd chosen mine. That night I sat by the window, moonlight streaming through the small apartment's glass. I thought of what Grandma once said. The law is for protecting those who can't protect themselves. I would do that, not just for her, but for myself. to prove I wasn't invisible. I would take this to court, and I would let the truth speak. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, phone calls, and relentless preparation. I wasn't a lawyer, just a first-year law student, but I knew I couldn't let this matter pass without a fight. I had Grandma's medical records, Mrs. Helen's testimony, and details about the suspiciously notarized transfer contract. I also reached out to the couple buying the house, Bob and Susan Miller, to ask if they'd be willing to testify. Though hesitant at first, Susan, with a sympathetic tone, agreed to appear in court. "We didn't know Mrs. Lorraine wasn't lucid," she said over the phone. "If we had known, we wouldn't have signed the contract." Her words offered a glimmer of hope, but I knew the trial wouldn't be easy. I was up against my parents and Kyle, people who not only had money but also the unshakable belief that they were always right. Professor Stein became my guide. She didn't represent me in court. I couldn't afford a lawyer, and I wanted to do this myself. But she helped me prepare documents, organize arguments, and practice presenting my case to a judge. "Devin, focus on two things," she said during a meeting in her university office. "First, prove that Mrs. Lorraine lacked the mental capacity to sign the contract. Second, demonstrate that your parents deliberately exploited that. You have evidence, but you need to present it clearly and persuasively." I nodded, memorizing every word. But every time I thought about standing in court facing my parents, my heart pounded. They weren't just defendants in a lawsuit. They were my family, or at least the people I once called family. I thought of Kyle, whom my parents always shielded, and Avery, who chose to stay on the sidelines, silent as if uninvolved. I wondered, would they show up in court? Would they look me in the eye and justify what they'd done? The trial date arrived faster than I expected. The Fort Collins courthouse was small but solemn, with dark wooden walls and rows of benches for spectators. I wore an old suit, feeling uneasy in the stiff attire, but reminding myself I needed to look professional. Grandma sat beside me, wearing the light blue sweater I'd given her, her silver hair neatly tied back. She looked small, fragile. I didn't want her to go through this, to hear the painful truths, but I had no choice. This was the only way to protect her. My parents were there early, seated on the other side of the courtroom with a lawyer in a sleek black suit, impeccably pressed. Kyle wasn't there, probably too busy with his crumbling company. Avery's absence didn't surprise me either. She always steered clear of trouble. The courtroom fell silent as the judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, entered. She struck her gavel, and the trial began. I stood, my voice trembling at first but growing stronger as I spoke. "Your Honor," I began, "I stand here today to request that the court declare the contract transferring my grandmother's house, Mrs. Lorraine Hayes, null and void. My grandmother has been diagnosed with cognitive decline and lacked the mental capacity to sign the contract. My parents, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Cynthia Hayes, exploited this condition to coerce her into signing without clearly explaining the contract's contents. I presented the medical records with documents from Dr. Harris detailing Grandma's cognitive decline diagnosis. I submitted Mrs. Helen's testimony, her neighbor's account. Susan, the buyer, was also present that day. She took the stand, hesitant but honest, confirming, "Mrs. Lorraine didn't seem well the day she signed the contract. She asked several times who we were, and Mr. Richard had to prompt her to sign. I don't think she understood what was happening." My parents' lawyer, a tall man with a deep, confident voice, stood to counter. "Your Honor, my clients, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Cynthia Hayes, acted in Mrs. Lorraine's best interests. Mrs. Lorraine signed the contract willingly, and it was legally notarized. There's no evidence of coercion. Furthermore, the Hayes family had planned to arrange care for Mrs. Lorraine in a high-quality nursing facility. The plaintiff, Devin Hayes, is merely an inexperienced law student blowing this out of proportion due to personal emotions." His words stung like a blade. I felt my face flush, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew he was trying to discredit me, but I wouldn't let him. When my turn came, I stood again, my voice firmer. "Your Honor, this isn't about personal emotions. This is about justice. My parents knew my grandmother wasn't lucid, yet they pressured her to sign a contract to fund my brother's failing company. They didn't consult her, didn't explain anything to her, and didn't care where she'd go after losing her home. I have evidence that the money from this transaction went to my brother's company account, not to my grandmother. Then it was Grandma's turn to testify. I didn't want her to take the stand, but Professor Stein had said her testimony was critical. I helped her up, holding her hand as she walked to the stand. She looked small under the courtroom's harsh lights, but there was a quiet strength in her posture. The judge, with a gentle tone, asked, "Mrs. Lorraine, do you remember signing papers to sell your house?" Grandma looked at the judge, her eyes hazy. I'm not sure," she said, her voice trembling. "My son Richard told me to sign something. I thought it was bank papers. I don't remember clearly." She paused, her eyes welling up. "But that's my house. My husband and I lived there our whole lives. I never wanted to leave." Her words hit the courtroom like a hammer. I glanced at my parents. Mom bowed her head lower, clutching her purse tightly. Dad maintained his cold expression, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Their lawyer tried to argue that Grandma was still lucid at the time of signing, but Susan's testimony, the medical records, and Mrs. Helen's statement weakened their case. The trial dragged on all day, each minute feeling like a year. When the judge called a recess to deliberate, I helped Grandma to a bench in the hallway. "You did great, Devin," she said, her voice faint but proud. I smiled, though a storm of emotions raged inside me: anger, pain, and hope. That afternoon, the judge returned with her ruling. "Based on the evidence presented," she said, her voice clear and authoritative, "the court declares the contract transferring Mrs. Lorraine Hayes' house null and void, as she lacked the mental capacity at the time of signing. Furthermore, the court grants temporary guardianship to Devin Hayes to ensure Mrs. Lorraine's best interests." The courtroom fell silent for a moment. Then I heard Mrs. Helen's sigh of relief from the spectator benches. I held Grandma's hand, feeling her squeeze mine tightly. I looked at my parents. Dad stood and left the courtroom without looking at me. Mom followed, her head still bowed. They didn't say a word, but I knew they'd lost. Not just in court, but to the truth they'd tried to hide. As we left the courthouse, the afternoon sun was fading over the Rocky Mountains. I helped Grandma into the car, feeling a mix of relief and pain. I had won, but the cost was a rift with my family. I didn't know if I still had a family after today. But when Grandma looked at me, smiled, and said, "You're my pride, Devin," I knew I'd done the right thing. The truth had been laid bare, and I'd kept my promise to her. And to Grandpa, who taught me that the law is for protecting those who can't protect themselves. The drive from Fort Collins back to Grandma's house that day felt longer than usual. Not because of the distance, but because of the heavy thoughts weighing on my mind. Grandma sat in the passenger seat, her frail hands resting on her lap, her gaze dreamy as she looked out the window. The Rocky Mountains loomed faintly in the twilight, their snow-capped peaks glinting as a reminder that the world kept moving, even as my heart was in turmoil. I had won the lawsuit, and Grandma's house had been restored to her ownership, but this victory didn't bring complete joy. I thought of my parents, Kyle, Avery, the people who left the courtroom without so much as a glance back at me. They were my family, but now I wasn't sure if I still belonged to them. When we arrived at the house on the outskirts of Fort Collins, I parked in front of the gate, looking at the small garden where the lavender bushes still swayed resiliently in the breeze. The house seemed to be waiting for our return. The faded gray tiled roof, the chipped wooden window frames, and the armchair in the living room where I knew Grandma would sit as soon as we stepped inside. I helped her out of the car, setting her bag down on the floor. She looked around, her eyes brightening slightly, as if recognizing the place for the first time in a long while. "This is our home, isn't it, Devin?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Yes, Grandma," I replied, smiling. "This is your home, and it will always be your home." I led her to the armchair, helped her settle in, and brewed a cup of her favorite herbal tea, a gentle blend of mint and chamomile. As I placed the cup in her hands, she grasped mine, squeezing lightly. "You're a good boy, Devin," she said. "Just like your grandfather when he was young." Her words made my heart ache. I knelt beside her, looking into her warm brown eyes, now often lost in confusion. "Grandma, I'm going to stay here with you for a while," I said, my voice hoarse. "I want to make sure you're okay." She smiled, but I saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "You don't need to do that, Devin," she whispered. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're never a burden," I said, fighting back tears. "You're the most important person to me." And I meant it. Over the past weeks, as I fought to save this house, I realized that Grandma wasn't just someone I wanted to protect. She was the only person who truly saw me, who loved me without comparison or judgment. The decision to stay in Fort Collins wasn't easy. I knew it meant putting law school in Boulder on hold, setting aside the dreams of a grand career I'd once cherished. But as I looked at Grandma sitting there with her tea, I knew I couldn't do otherwise. Law school would still be there, but Grandma wouldn't. Her time was slipping away, day by day, memory by memory, and I wanted to be with her, holding on to the moments we had left. In the days that followed, I reorganized my life around her. I brought a few clothes and books from my Boulder apartment to her house. I called Professor Stein, explaining that I needed to take a semester off to care for Grandma. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Devin, you've accomplished something many seasoned lawyers couldn't. You protected someone who needed it. Law school will always welcome you back. Take care of your grandmother." Her words eased my mind, but also reminded me that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I started a new routine in Fort Collins. Each morning I woke early, brewed tea for Grandma, and joined her in the garden. I learned how to care for the lavender bushes, how to pull weeds without damaging the roots. Grandma, despite her fading memory, showed me how to water properly, how to trim dead branches. "Plants are like people, Devin," she said once, her voice dreamy. "You have to care for them, love them, for them to thrive." I nodded, feeling her words were about more than just plants. They were about us. In the afternoons, I sat with her in the living room, listening to her recount old stories about Grandpa, their youth, the picnics by the lake when I was a child. Sometimes she called me by Grandpa's name, and I didn't correct her. I just smiled, held her hand, and let her live in the memories she still held. Those moments, however brief, were the most precious to me. But it wasn't always peaceful. The rift with my family remained an unhealed wound. After the trial, my parents didn't contact me. I heard from a mutual friend that Dad was furious, calling me an ungrateful son in front of his friends. Mom stayed silent, but I knew she was trying to preserve the perfect family image by avoiding mention of me. Kyle sent me a single text. "You've ruined everything, Devin. Hope you're happy." I didn't respond. As for Avery, she kept posting happy photos on Instagram, but I was no longer in any of them. I didn't regret it. My family had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. One evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen, Grandma called me from the living room. "Devin, come here," she said, her voice soft but clear. I sat beside her, noticing she was holding the wedding photo of her and Grandpa. "You know," she said, her eyes bright with rare clarity, "your grandfather always said you'd do something great. I see him in you, the way you fight, the way you don't give up." I bowed my head, feeling tears well up. "I just wanted to do what's right, Grandma," I said. "I learned that from you and Grandpa." She smiled, then suddenly called me by Grandpa's name. "James, you always make me proud." I didn't correct her. I just held her hand, letting her live in that moment where she and Grandpa were still together. In the months that followed, I began reflecting on the lessons this journey had taught me. I learned that family isn't just those bound by blood, but those who truly see you, who truly love you. I learned that justice isn't just about winning a lawsuit, but about standing up for what's right, even at a painful cost. And I learned that sometimes the only person who still remembers you, truly remembers you, is the one you should never forget. One afternoon, as Grandma and I sat in the garden watching the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, I thought about the future. I knew I'd return to law school someday, continue my dream of becoming a lawyer like Grandpa. But now I wasn't chasing ambitions to prove myself to anyone. I was doing it for myself, for Grandma, and for those who need protection. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Grandma took my hand and smiled. "You're my home, Devin," she said. I squeezed her hand, my heart full. Though my family had fractured, though the road ahead was still challenging, I knew I'd found where I belonged, right here with Grandma, in this house full of memories. "Sometimes the only person who still remembers you," I whispered, repeating the lesson this journey had etched into my heart, "is the one you should never forget."